man. Donald Trump speaking live at the Freedom 250 Grand Prix.
Got 3 drivers in.
That's pretty cool.
He's always got something going on.
Always. It's just good to see him alive when you realize what could have happened 2 years ago to the day. Joining us now is Alan Mendenhall with the Heritage Foundation. Of course, he's also a columnist there at 1819 News and appears all over the media landscape these days. Alan, how are you doing these days?
I'm great. We have 6 Saturdays until college football, and it kind of feels like it right now. It's overcast and rainy, and it's a little cooler. I can feel football season creeping up.
Slowly but surely, and that's when this whole region comes alive. Yeah. People live and die for that whole season on Saturdays, especially.
Yeah, summer. What's summer? Who cares about summer?
Oh man, let's skip over it. I'm with you, brother. Let's get right to the fall. Let's get
it's hot. It's rainy. What are we doing even during this summer? But I got to ask you about some of the top news, and then I definitely want to touch on what you've read about this week. But first, this being the 2-year anniversary of the president almost being killed in front of God and everybody. I remember that day where I was, and I'm glad we're on the timeline we're on because the alternatives are horrifying. But it's kind of crazy when you look back how fast these 2 years have flown by.
It really is. And actually, just last week, there was a report from the Office of Inspector General that came out on the Secret Service failures. And they were like systemic failures, undertrained personnel, bad communication between law enforcement and Secret Service. I mean, all kinds of things that are shocking, like, a drone flying for 9 minutes as like a test drive and no one saw it, like crazy stuff. And I was just saying this to somebody this morning, but we've had 45 people who've been president. So we're on like the 47th president, but because Trump and Grover Cleveland had non-consecutive terms, there were really only 45 individuals. Well, 4 of them were assassinated when they were in office. And that means that almost 9% of the people who served as president were assassinated. And if you start adding in the assassination attempts with like Andrew Jackson, Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, Truman, Ford, Reagan, Trump, like you start to realize, wow, it's like really, really important that we have a competent Secret Service because, it's an unsafe position to be president of the United States.
Yeah, and it's also a weird place being where the official explanation of what went wrong, even with all these reports like you just laid out, it still doesn't really feel like a satisfying answer. Maybe I'm not one to go full conspiracy, but this particular story just in the gut doesn't feel right, what we've been told so far. Well, we just happened to screw up.
Well, I thought Trump's remark about the 2-footer on the golf course was hilarious. That like missing the shot from 155 yards is like missing a 2-footer, because I remember playing in our club championship and I missed about a 1-incher one time by accident because I leaned over. It was just this little 1-inch birdie putt. And I leaned over to try to just like say, guys, I'll just slap this out of the way to get it out of your line. I'll just finish out. And I like leaned over on my tippy toes in this funny way and slapped it, and it missed like from 1 inch. So it is possible. But at any rate, no, I agree. It's disturbing the extent of the failures. And honestly, all the recommendations from that report were pretty straightforward. It was like, communicate better, train officers harder, like anything that you'd like knew that the conclusion would be beforehand was what you got. So, it's disturbing. It really is.
It is.
As someone who's handled a lot of weapons in my time, I disagree with the statement. That's not the ideal weapon you would use for a certain kill shot. It's accurate at that, but it was suppressed, number one. It was using 55 grain ammo. So it was not the ideal weapon of choice because it was a short carbine. However, you could still do it. I could have hit that target. And my thing is this, like you just said, and Joey, we talked about earlier, it's the cacophony, the plethora of other issues that were identified. And it's almost as if they were purposely sort of like what the Arthur Conan Doyle said. When you remove all the options and whatever you're left with is even as outlandish as it might sound, that's all that you're left with. That's it. It looks to me like this was completely botched on purpose. The coordination was not there. And the drone, you talked about the drone. Do you know that their drone was, quote, broke? You don't have any backup drones? You bring only one drone? It's always a pair and a spare when you go. And I don't get that.
Well, and it's easy enough with the line of sight issue, put like a truck or a bleacher, something in
Absolutely.
Because that's typically what they do to secure a line of sight when there's a building like that. And the building wasn't secure. It was just, it's shocking. The extent of the failures were pretty shocking. And it's important to point out that this was, a Department of Homeland Security that was led by Mayorkas at the time under a Biden administration. So, the report does not place blame like that in any kind of partisan way. But, it is important to point out that at a minimum, we have some high level incompetence there.
Now, the other big news item over the weekend, of course, is the sudden passing away, the death of Lindsey Graham. And, I mentioned earlier in the show, I constantly was making fun of and criticizing Lindsey. But when, somebody like that who's such a larger than life personality in American politics for decades, I don't know, there's part of me, it's like, man, I miss the guy. But what's your thought of seeing this news all of a sudden?
Oh, well, it was shocking. I happened to be awake when the news, when the messages started coming in, and I actually sat down at my computer to do a Fox News hit at 2 a.m. and then it got abruptly canceled. And so I was like, wow, I am up and at 'em and now I got to go back to bed. But that was shocking. And, it really is a rough moment in the Senate now because you've got McConnell who's out of commission. So this is jeopardizing any chance at passing the SAVE Act, any kind of new reconciliation bill, getting Trump's defense spending through. I mean, all of these things are jeopardized at a critical moment. And it makes you think about other things too. Like at the U.S. Supreme Court, you're like, well, Justice Thomas is 78 right. And Alito's right behind him. And we saw what happened with Ginsburg when she died in office to the left. Like maybe these guys ought to be looking at retirement. But then if they retire, are we ever going to get anybody as solid as those two? They've been the best Supreme Court justices we've had for a long time, since Scalia's passing for sure. And so do we have anybody as reliable as them? I mean, I don't know, but I would rather have Trump be picking their successors than, any Democratic president in 4 years, assuming that might happen. It's just a weird thing. I feel old now. I feel old because all these people keep dying that don't seem old to me.
Yeah, Graham in particular, I was like, that guy seemed quite alive. Yeah. But and I think his father died at around the same age of a heart condition as well. And sometimes when things rhyme in that sort of tragic way. But I think putting in his sister for the interim is probably a nice touch. And as far as McConnell goes, I guess he posted some proof of life stuff, and they actually explained what he had a spill in the fall, went unconscious, had to battle pneumonia for a while. But especially with McConnell, and we've brought this up with the current governor and stuff, like some of y'all need to do the nation or the state a favor and retire. Like I really am frustrated by this game of, are they healthy? Are they not healthy? Yeah. I'm just going to die in office till the wheels fall off. I think that leaves everybody in a tough position. And your point about the Supreme Court's well taken to the same degree. But, the elected officials get more of a choice in that matter instead of that lifetime appointment. And it just seems unfair to the population. It's like, even look at Susan Collins. And I'm like, come on.
Did that for a while. That's been going on for a while.
Because it could, a bad thing, and God forbid, thinking about our mortality, but a bad thing could happen all of a sudden, like we've seen.
Yeah, no, it's true. And, there's something that athletes have kind of learned pretty well, and it's to bow out gracefully. Most of them don't just like hang around so that they're like warming the bench. They know. And unfortunately, our politicians haven't quite learned that.
Yeah, go out on top.
There's a lot of financial incentive to stay in office. So
Yeah.
Well, that's true. Yeah, you could all these guys and girls that hold office, they could go get all kinds of nice little endowed chairs at universities and just tell war stories and talk and all that kind of stuff. They'd have people to grade the papers for them and all that.
Well, and one thing to Lindsey Graham's credit is apparently he was one of the lowest net worth people in the Senate for being up there decades. It was like, well, it looks like he didn't, at least officially, to his own self, enrich himself. But
yeah, I saw the house that he still owned in South Carolina, and I forget what the cost was, but he bought it for like $100-something thousand in whatever year it was, and he never upgraded to a bigger house. He never moved, never did any of the flashy things, and that's definitely to his credit.
now, you have a piece out today at 1819 News saying the racial quotas embedded in Alabama law. What in the world? I thought we were past this.
Yeah, so we've got all kinds of racial quotas in our law, things that say, okay, you have to have X number of seats to an African American or X number of geographic diversity. So they're two different things. I've got a cheat sheet over here for the hard quotas. So these are at the Alabama High School of Mathematics and Science Board of Directors, the Board of Occupational Therapy, the Board of Social Work Examiners, the House Finance Authority, the Real Estate Commission. I mean, there are a bunch. And then when you get to soft quotas, these are things where it's like you need to just have things that are inclusive by gender, economic diversity, whatever it is. And there are dozens of those, tons of them. And I think all of them are subject to being struck down under the 14th Amendment, equal protection. And some people will say, well, it doesn't matter that these discriminate on the basis, because what that means when you have these racial quotas, it means that you are discriminating on the basis of race.
Yes.
And some people will come in and say, well, because, there's a history of discrimination against a particular race, there needs to be some sort of institutionalized reverse discrimination in order to make up for past injustices or something like that. But the thing is, once you move away from that colorblind aspect of the law, once you start saying, okay, it's okay for the law to discriminate on the basis of race under this circumstances, well, then you start getting into troubling slippery slope, which is like, okay, well, how much discrimination is okay on the basis of race? How long do we discriminate on the basis of race? Which races do we discriminate against and which races don't we discriminate against? Who decides who gets to discriminate against which group? I mean, it's just so much better if the law applies neutrally and equally, notwithstanding race, in particular because race is a surface level characteristic that is unchosen. Nobody picks their race. It's an immutable characteristic that we come into the world born with. And so you shouldn't punish people for having a particular race because they don't choose it. Punishment is for things that you choose. You make a bad decision and you deserve to pay the consequences for it. Right. But this is something that is completely unchosen.
And it's interesting that especially the hard quotas are in the place I'm just not surprised. Like all these different boards, some of which I just don't even think should exist, all these regulatory boards that are out there. But it does seem that's the culture. And, I guess I could try to piss off the Real Estate Commission or the Board of Chiropractors, but in particular, the Board for Registered Interior Designers. Why should that exist? And if I'm making interior designers mad, what are you going to do? Come and pick up awful, ugly curtains to put in my home?
Like they're going to pull the wallpaper off that you put up.
But it seems like this is it's part and parcel of that culture that's around this sort of government, these government board and bodies.
Yeah. While we're scrutinizing the boards for their racial discrimination, maybe we should ask whether they should exist at all. But that's part of what the problem is with occupational licensure. It's anti-competitive practices that actually different occupations like because they want to monopolize, they want to concentrate power and not let there be innovation and competition. Competition is what will lower prices and benefit consumers, but a lot of businesses don't want that. They want to be easy. They don't want the competition.
Now, and back to this idea that these quotas could run afoul of the Constitution, and probably do run afoul of the Constitution. Is there a way to actually get the ball moving in the courts on this?
Oh yeah. Anybody who would like to serve and cannot because of the quota should probably just get in touch with me because I could put you in touch with the people who are really interested in litigating this particular issue.
Yeah, be nice to see.
Speaking of litigation, I've been seeing in the press and again, got to be careful of the sources, but a lot of people are winning their lawsuits against being persecuted on the Charlie Kirk stuff and all this, and speaking out and being politically very, very flamboyant. What are your thoughts on all that? Have you been tracking any of that?
Yeah, well, I'm not looking at it very, very closely, but what happens is you have academic freedom in universities, and so that's a contractual thing. That's not just like my First Amendment right to speak or not speak, or whatever. You actually contract into these academic freedom agreements, and so that's a problem. Also, on public university campuses, depending where you air the speech, certain things can be said. Like if I am on a public space, a government property, and I want to speak about particular things, then I can. Now that doesn't cross the line into criminal acts, which is what you see a lot of university students doing, is vandalizing stuff. And they're like, well, this is my speech. Like, well, nobody, your freedom of speech doesn't go into vandalism. That's actually just a crime. Like that's not an utterance. But yeah, I think part of the issue is contractually, a lot of these professors have academic freedom. And so as distasteful as their comments are, and as horrible as they are, they've got this academic freedom. Now, a lot of private universities don't have that kind of academic freedom. Most religious universities have a much narrower parameters for academic freedom because, for example, if you're a religious university, you can't teach heresy or you can't undermine the faith or something like that. And I know I taught at Faulkner and we had to sign a statement of faith and that kind of thing when I was there. And that's perfectly legitimate. You don't have absolute academic freedom when you work at an institution like that. It's this, most of the public universities are based on the German research model, and the German research model is sort of predicated on the view that we ought to have this collision of ideas and that the parameters of acceptable opinion ought to be as wide as possible, even if people say things that really do not contribute to the sum of knowledge, really do not expand the frontiers of understanding. They're just, base, horrible things, but still that's what they're allowed to do by contract.
Yeah, in a way, they kind of punish themselves by saying such ridiculous things.
Yeah, they totally discredit themselves.
So the one at Auburn is why I'm asking. That recently she won her lawsuit against Auburn.
Yeah. Well, it's a thorny issue, like Alan said with the contracting. Like it gets some interesting aspects, but it's almost like you should have some basic standards. I believe in freedom of speech, but especially private institutions should definitely have their own basic standards. But we're pretty much out of time here, Alan. If folks want to check out your work and maybe want to get in touch with you, just maybe work on something with the Heritage Foundation, how can they do so?
Yeah, you can reach out to me. There's a contact form on my website, which is at alanmendenhall.com. Shoot me an email. It goes straight to my email when people leave me messages. A lot of them are kind of mean, so I don't respond to them. But if you send me a nice one, I'll probably respond.
Well, I appreciate it. And people got to stop being mean. That's just
mean to him. I mean, he's so affable. Come on.
Well, and
good looking too. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, thank you, Alan. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, guys.
I love it, man.
Again, Alan Mendenhall, always appreciate his time. This part of the program brought to you by